During the Easter celebration, an enraged father slammed his fist on the table with such force that the silver cutlery jumped in fright. Leaning over the plates, his face burning with fury, he roared, "You are a disgrace to this family! Get out of my house!" An ominous silence fell. His younger brother Nolan dropped his fork, while his sister Clara stared at her plate, pretending nothing had happened. No one dared to look up. The protagonist, as if struck by lightning, froze. The pain in his leg, like an echo, reminded him of every sacrifice he had made in uniform. 8 years serving as a Navy SEAL, every dollar earned sent home, with the naive belief in his family's support and their pride in him. He had returned home wounded, with unhealed scars and a limp, hoping for a warm welcome, but instead faced contempt in his own home. His father's words, like a sharp dagger, pierced his heart. "Don't you dare look at me like that, Elias. Did you hear what I said? Get out!" In his father's eyes, there was something colder than mere anger, contempt, as if he were nothing. As he pushed back from the table, he heard the chair scrape across the floor. His heart pounded, and his body trembled not only from pain, but also from betrayal. He who had risked his life for his country was being thrown out like a criminal by the man he once idolized. This was his last meal with his family as a son. He didn't know yet that his expulsion from his childhood home would lead him to the only person who still loved him with all her heart, and to a secret she had kept for many years. The moment his grandmother saw him, she would reveal the truth about his mother's tragic death, shattering everything he believed about his family. He had grown up believing that family was sacred. His mother, Laura, would whisper to him before bed, "No matter what happens in life, Elias, remember you always have us." These words had sustained him through grueling training, long deployments, and sleepless nights when he doubted if he would live to see the dawn. He fought not only for his country, but also for the family waiting for him at home. At least, that's what he thought. At 19, full of enthusiasm and determination, he joined the Navy SEALs. His father had never expressed pride in him, only tersely stating, "Don't disappoint me." That was his character, a man who valued strength, reputation, and control above all else. His mother, by contrast, had given him such a tight hug at the bus station that he could barely breathe. Releasing him, she looked at him with tear-filled eyes and pleaded, "Write to me as soon as you can." He promised he would. Over the years of his service, he kept almost nothing for himself, sending nearly every cent he earned home, trusting his family to manage it wisely. He imagined the money going towards Nolan's tuition, Clara's art lessons, or keeping the house in good repair. He saw it as his duty to protect them, even from thousands of miles away. However, on his short leaves home, he noticed changes. Nolan became more withdrawn, Clara avoided open conversations, and his father spoke only in terse phrases. He convinced himself it was their way of coping with his absence. During his last deployment, everything changed. The mission went awry. An explosion, echoing in the night, shattered his body, leaving scars that ached with every movement and a limp he would carry for life. He was sent home for treatment, and for the first time, he felt the fragility of a body he had once considered indestructible. Even then, he believed his family would help him heal. By Easter, he had been home for several months. Doctors said he was lucky to survive. Lucky, a word he had always hated. Lucky people don't feel pain. They can sleep peacefully, not waking from flashes of fire and smoke that tormented their dreams. Nevertheless, he put on his best clothes and accepted Clara's invitation to join the family for dinner, hoping to reconnect and remind them that despite his wounds, he was still their son and brother. The atmosphere in the house he arrived at was electric with unspoken words and suppressed emotions. The familiar landscape, with its impeccably trimmed bushes and the soft blue shutters his mother had once lovingly painted every spring, now seemed like a backdrop for a drama. The aroma of roasted ham, freshly baked bread, and cinnamon pie, which used to evoke comfort, now felt suffocating. Clara, his sister, met him with a nervous smile and a timid hug, as if afraid to break his fragile state. Nolan, his brother, stood behind her, hands in his pockets, offering only a slight nod in greeting. His father appeared last, his face impassive, his eyes appraising Elias from head to toe as if he were a stranger. At the table, laden with food, an oppressive silence reigned. The conversation was strained and superficial. Nolan spoke of his new internship, Clara of a small gallery exhibiting her sketches. His father remained silent, methodically chewing his food, his jaw tightening each time his gaze inadvertently fell upon his son. Elias tried to lighten the mood. "I'm proud of you, Nolan," he said. "That internship could open up great opportunities for you." Nolan nodded quickly, mumbling, "Thanks," but his eyes instinctively darted to his father, as if seeking approval to continue the conversation. The tension in the room grew with each passing minute. Elias tried again, telling Clara how proud their mother would be to see her work exhibited. Clara's fork clinked against her plate, and she forced a weak smile, whispering, "Thanks, Eli." His father suddenly slammed his glass on the table, making everyone jump. "Enough!" he snarled. His voice was so sharp that goosebumps ran down Elias's spine. "You sit here talking as if you've done something heroic, but all I see is a broken man living off pity." These words cut deeper than any wound he had sustained in battle. He looked around the table, seeking some support, but Nolan stared at the tabletop, and Clara meticulously folded her napkin. No one uttered a word. The silence was deafening, louder than any explosion he had ever heard. He felt his chest constrict, and his breathing became shallow. Gathering his courage, he spoke, his voice trembling. "Father, for 8 years, I sent almost my entire salary home. I thought I was helping the family. I thought I was making you proud." A cold, unyielding fire burned in his father's eyes. "Proud? You think coming home a cripple and a burden to everyone is something to be proud of? You've brought nothing but shame. You are a disgrace, Elias. Get out of my house." The chair scraped across the floor as he stood. His legs trembled, but not just from his physical injuries. It was the weight of betrayal, the crushing realization that despite all his sacrifices and losses, he would never be good enough for his father. He cast one last look at his brother and sister, silently pleading for them to intervene, but they remained impassive. He walked toward the door, his heart pounding, each step echoing the agonizing truth. The family he had so desperately fought for no longer wanted him. As he closed the door behind him, he felt the tears he had held back for so long stream down his face. That night, his father broke something in him that felt like it could never fully heal. However, he didn't yet know that this expulsion would lead him to the only person who still saw the real him, his grandmother, who would reveal the truth about his mother's death, a truth that would overturn everything he believed about his family and himself. The front door slammed shut behind him, the sound echoing in his chest like a gunshot. The cool night air hit his face, but it couldn't quell the burning resentment raging inside. His body ached from his injuries, his legs burned with pain with every step, but the pain in his heart was sharper. He had faced enemies in foreign lands, people armed with weapons and hatred in their eyes, but nothing could have prepared him for the moment his own father told him he was no longer his son. He stood at the edge of the driveway, looking at the house that no longer felt like home. Through the dining room window, he saw his family, still seated at the table, illuminated by the warm light of the chandelier. They seemed whole and unharmed, as if nothing had happened. For a moment, he was overcome with the urge to go back, to scream, to demand that someone stand up for him. But the truth was harsh and clear. If they wouldn't defend him when he was right there, they never would. The street was silent. Only the distant rumble of cars from the highway disturbed its peace. The traveler pulled his jacket tighter, his limp slowing his pace. A sharp pain shot through his hip with every movement, but he stubbornly continued on his way. In this town, he had no car, no friends to turn to, not a single soul to call. His father's words, like drumbeats, echoed in his head. "You are a disgrace to the family. Get out." As he headed towards the bus station, the traveler noticed the flickering fluorescent lights that dispelled the gloom. The faint smell of gasoline and stale coffee hung in the air. A few people, equally weary travelers, sat hunched on plastic chairs, clutching their bags, with expressions of complete detachment on their faces. The man sank onto a bench, wincing at the pain in his leg. The woman behind the counter barely gave him a glance when he inquired about tickets. "Where are you headed?" she asked. The man's voice trembled as he replied, "To Maple Hollow, to Ruth Anders's farm." She quickly tapped on her computer keys and handed him a printed ticket. "The bus leaves in 10 minutes from platform 3. Memories flooded back as the traveler awaited his departure. Grandma Ruth had always been the only person who saw more in him than just a soldier. As a child, he spent summer months on her farm, chasing chickens, turning hay, and listening to her captivating stories on the porch swing as fireflies lit up the night. When his mother passed away, Ruth hugged him and whispered that a mother's love would never leave him. He hadn't seen her in years, but now he needed her more than ever. The bus arrived, its brakes screeching to a halt at the platform. The traveler boarded, overcoming the pain in his leg. The driver nodded in response to the ticket he offered. Inside the cabin, there was a stale smell of old upholstery and diesel fuel. The man slid into an empty seat in the middle of the bus and pressed his forehead against the cool glass. The city lights blurred as the bus pulled away from the station, plunging into the darkness of the highway. In the silence, broken only by the hum of the engine and the occasional cough of fellow passengers, the traveler's thoughts became obsessive. He replayed every moment of the ill-fated dinner over and over in his mind, trying to find signs he had missed. Was Clara's nervous smile a plea for silence? Was Nolan's silence an expression of shame or agreement with his father? And what about the money he had sent home for years? What had it been spent on? Was his father paying bills or lining his own pockets? The questions tormented him, but there were no answers on this bus. He shifted restlessly in his seat, feeling the aching pain in his leg and a heaviness in his chest. For years he had lived to serve others, sacrificing everything he had. Now he wondered if he had given himself to the wrong people. Perhaps his father had never cared about him. Perhaps his mother was the only one who truly understood him. The memory of her brought a sharp pain to his heart, stronger than any physical wound. He remembered her laughter, the songs she sang while cooking, and the gentle touches to his cheek when he was hurting. Her loss had been the hardest ordeal of his life. But tonight was almost as painful, as if he had lost his entire family. The bus rattled on the bumpy road leading out of the city. Streetlights became fewer, and the landscape outside the window turned into endless fields and forests, shrouded in moonlit shadows. The traveler closed his eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. Each time he started to drift off, his father's face, distorted with disgust, appeared before him, and his voice thundered in his ears. Shame, anger, and grief intertwined in his mind, making it impossible to distinguish between them. After several hours, the driver announced, "Maple Hollow, final stop." The traveler picked up his small duffel bag and stepped off the bus. The air here was cool and fresh, filled with the scent of earth and pine. In the distance, the old town clock tower stood tall, its hands frozen at midnight. He was the only passenger to alight at this stop, and as the bus sped away, silence descended upon him like a soft blanket. The traveler headed towards Grandma Ruth's farm, the gravel road crunching under his boots. Each step brought him closer to the only place that had always felt like a refuge. Grandma Ruth's house became his quiet haven. In the distance, the silhouette of the farmhouse was visible, and the light on the porch beckoned like a guiding beacon. Exhaustion gripped his body, but his heart urged him forward. As he drew closer, the traveler noticed movement. Grandma Ruth was standing on the porch, a fragile figure wrapped in a shawl, her silver hair shimmering in the light. She had probably heard the bus and guessed his arrival. His grandmother's hands tightly gripped the railing, and even from a distance, he could see her eyes widen at the sight of her grandson. In that moment, he was overwhelmed by conflicting emotions, relief at the realization that he was awaited and loved, and fear caused by the expression on his grandmother's face, which showed worry and a heaviness that foreshadowed a terrible truth. This night had already dealt a crushing blow, but what awaited him on the porch threatened to shatter him into pieces. The gravel crunched under his feet as he covered the last few yards to Grandma Ruth's porch. His body ached with fatigue, his leg pulsed with pain with every step, but her waiting figure gave him strength. The warm porch light illuminated the dark rural landscape, and her figure seemed unwavering. "Elias," she called softly, her voice echoing in the night stillness. He froze. The sound of his name, spoken with such love, was almost unbearable after what he had endured. His throat was dry, and he swallowed hard, forcing himself to move forward. As he reached the steps, he saw his grandmother descend to meet him. She embraced him with unexpected strength for her age. A faint scent of lavender, familiar from childhood, emanated from her shawl. He buried his face in her shoulder, and for the first time on that terrible night, allowed himself to cry. "What did they do to you, my boy?" she whispered, her voice trembling. He tried to answer, but the words caught in his throat. Finally, he choked out, "Father said I'm a disgrace to the family. He threw me out, Grandma, in front of everyone." His grandmother held him tighter, as if trying to piece together the broken fragments of his soul. Pulling back, he saw tears in her eyes, but behind them lay something more, tension and knowing. His grandmother took his face in her wrinkled hands and said, "Come inside, Elias. I should have told you something a long time ago." Inside, the farmhouse seemed just as it had in his childhood, creaking wooden floors, the smell of wood smoke, and walls adorned with family photographs. His gaze fell upon a photo of his mother in the hallway, her smile radiant, her eyes beaming with life. At the sight of it, he could barely keep his feet. His grandmother led him to the kitchen, the heart of the home, and poured a cup of tea, her hands trembling slightly. He cupped the warm mug with his fingers but didn't drink, only looked at it, waiting. "Tell me everything," she gently urged. "What happened tonight?" He recounted the dinner, every cruel word his father had uttered, the silence of his siblings. With each word, her jaw tightened, her knuckles turning white at the edge of the table. When he finished, she closed her eyes and let out a weary sigh. "I should have told you the truth years ago," she murmured. "But I thought I was protecting you." A shiver ran through him. "Protecting me from what?" She looked at him steadily and, in a quiet but firm voice, replied, "From your father? From what really happened to your mother?" His stomach clenched. For years he had believed his mother died of a sudden illness that no one could stop. That was the story his father told, and he had never doubted it. "What do you mean?" he croaked. His grandmother's hands trembled as she reached across the table and placed her palm over his. "Your mother didn't just get sick, Elias. She was worn down, broken by years of living under your father's pride and cruelty." It was as if he had been struck by lightning. He sat motionless, recalling small details from the past, his mother's tired eyes, her strained smile when his father barked orders, the quiet nights when he heard her crying through the walls. "She used to come to me," his grandmother continued, her voice trembling. "She'd sit on this very porch and say she felt invisible, that her spirit was suffocating. He never laid a hand on her, but words cut deeper than fists. When her health began to decline, he refused to let her get help. He said it would make him look weak if people thought his wife was fragile." Instant anger, burning and uncontrollable, filled me. He let her suffer to indulge his own arrogance. My grandmother, bowing her head, slowly agreed. "Exactly." She pleaded with him for the chance to seek qualified help. She begged for assistance, but he remained unyielding. By the time I could intervene, it was irrevocably too late. Her life faded not only due to illness, but from a deep spiritual wound. Your father will likely never admit it, but his excessive pride caused her death as surely as any disease. Clutching the edge of the table, I felt my knuckles turn white and my chest heaved. The sense of betrayal I had experienced at dinner was nothing compared to this revelation. All my life I had subconsciously blamed myself for my infrequent visits home, for not being able to save her. Now I knew the truth. It wasn't my fault, it was his. My grandmother's gaze softened. "Your mother loved you more than anything, Elias. Before she passed, she asked me, 'Promise me that someday you'll tell him. Let him know that her death wasn't his fault.'" Tears blurred my eyes, and I could barely breathe under the weight of her words. "All these years," I whispered, "all these years I thought I wasn't good enough." "You were always good enough," my grandmother firmly countered. "Your father was never worthy of her, and he knows it. That's why he lashes out at you deep down. He can't face what he did." The room swam before my eyes as I tried to process what was happening. Anger, grief, relief, all these feelings crashed down on me at once. I covered my face with my hands, shaking with the sobs I had held back for years. My grandmother, moving her chair closer, embraced me. Her support and strength comforted me in a way nothing else could. "You are not your father, Elias. Do you hear me? You inherited your mother's heart, and he can never take that away." In that moment, I felt the weight of the truth descend upon me. It was crushing, yet liberating. For the first time since my mother's death, I understood that the shame I had carried all these years had never belonged to me. Wiping my face, I looked at my grandmother, seeing unwavering resolve in her eyes, even through her tears. "Thank you for telling me," I whispered. She nodded. "It was time you knew the truth. You deserved to live, free from his shadow." The kitchen clock on the wall monotonously ticked away the seconds, each tick echoing in the silence that followed my grandmother's words. My mind was in turmoil. The truth about my mother's death had broken something inside me, and I felt years of pain erupting like a breached dam. And yet, in my grandmother's eyes, there was something unsaid that made my chest tighten. "Grandma," I whispered, my voice trembling, "you're hiding something, aren't you?" Her hands trembled slightly as she folded them in her lap. She looked at my mother's photograph hanging by the door, her eyes full of memories. "Yes," she confessed, "there's still something else you need to know. It's the part I was most afraid to tell you." I leaned forward, palms flat on the table. "Tell me. I can handle it." She looked at me with a mixture of sadness and resolve. "Your father was cruel to your mother not only because of his pride, he repeatedly cheated on her. She knew about it. She silently carried that burden, believing that if she remained strong for you and your siblings, she could endure this betrayal. But as her health began to deteriorate, when she most needed his support and compassion, he became even colder and more distant. He left her alone in her suffering." These words struck me like a physical blow. My stomach knotted with pain, my jaw clenched, and I felt a rage rising within me that surpassed anything I had ever experienced, even on the battlefield. "He cheated on her when she was sick?" My grandmother's voice trembled as she nodded. "Yes, she confided in me. She begged me not to tell you or your siblings. She wanted you to remember your father as a strong man, not the broken one she saw." But her heart couldn't bear that burden. That betrayal was the final straw, crushing what little strength she had left. Rage boiled within me like lava, ready to erupt. My fist slammed against the table, making the teacup tremble in unison with my body. Fury seethed, because all these years my father had skillfully convinced me of my mother's natural demise, presenting her passing as an inevitable tragedy. But beneath that lie lay a bitter truth. He himself, driven by pride, had ended her life. Tears blurred my vision, yet the flames of anger burned even brighter. Memories of battles with enemies trying to break me paled in comparison to the pain of realizing that the man whose approval I had so desperately sought was the cause of my mother's death. My grandmother, despite her fragility, firmly took my hand in hers. Her words, like a beacon in the darkness, pierced through the storm raging in my soul. She reminded me that I should not let my father's sins define my destiny, that my mother would not want me to carry this burden. Her goal was to open my eyes so that I would not spend my life chasing the approval of a man who did not deserve it. Her words, like a healing balm, soothed the pain. I lowered my head, sobs shaking my body. For years I had striven to prove my strength, worth, and integrity to my father. I sent home hard-earned money, naively believing I would earn a place at his table. I bore scars as proof of my sacrifice, hoping for his recognition. And all this time, he was the one who destroyed the woman who loved me most in the world. The truth was a turning point. The shame I had carried was no longer mine. The burden of guilt fell upon my father's shoulders. Through my tears, I heard my grandmother's voice again, soft but firm. She said that my father would never admit the truth, that he would cling to his pride until his last breath. But I, Elias, could choose a different path, to honor my mother's memory not by fighting for his approval, but by living a life that reflected her love. I raised my tear-stained eyes to her. How could I move forward, knowing the truth? My grandmother squeezed my hand and replied that I must let go of the man who cast me out, cherish the memory of the woman who loved me more than life, and carry her strength within me. Only then could I heal. Her words sank deep into my soul, filling a void I hadn't realized was there for years. It was as if I stood at a crossroads of two paths, one leading to bitterness and rage, the other to a painful yet genuine freedom. Wiping my tears, I slowly nodded, resolving to honor my mother and forever banish my father's voice from my head. A faint, tired yet proud smile appeared on my grandmother's lips. She said my mother would have wanted exactly this, and expressed confidence that I would find my way, for I already had her heart. For the first time in a long while, I felt a semblance of peace, a fragile flicker of light in the darkness. The truth hurt, but it also freed me. No more fighting for my father's approval, no more proving my worth to a man who had none. I looked again at my mother's photograph. Her smile was warm and alive. For the first time, I allowed myself to smile back, not because the pain was gone, but because I finally understood her love would always be with me, and I would live in a way that kept it alive. That night at the kitchen table, I lost the father I knew, but I found the truth about my mother, a truth that would define every choice I made in the future. I stayed at Grandma Ruth's farm, unable to sleep. The truth echoed in my head. Every creak of the old floor, every rustle of wind outside the window reminded me that I was no longer the same person who had entered her home. The world I knew had collapsed, but in its place, something new was beginning to form. In the morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains, illuminating the old quilt on the bed prepared for me. For the first time in years, I woke without the crushing guilt on my chest. The pain in my leg and the scars on my body remained, but my spirit had been transformed. The shame that had haunted me since my mother's death no longer belonged to me. It belonged to my father. Already on her feet, Grandma Ruth, with an apron lovingly tied around her waist, stood at the stove, deftly flipping pancakes just like in the good old days of his childhood. She glanced over her shoulder and gave him a warm smile. "Good morning, Elias. Sit down. Have some breakfast." He took his place on the familiar wooden chair without hesitation. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee and melted butter filled the room, enveloping him in a long-awaited sense of comfort. His grandmother placed a plate in front of him, then sat opposite, her eyes studying him intently. "You look refreshed," she observed. "I feel different," he confessed, "as if I was carrying someone else's sins. Now I understand they were never mine." She nodded, her gaze expressing both pride and sadness. "That's the hardest lesson, my dear. Sometimes the people closest to us cause such pain that we begin to think their mistakes are our own. But you have grown wiser. This is where a new life begins." Memories of his father's face, distorted by anger and full of words meant to break him, resurfaced. He also recalled his siblings, frozen in silence, either unwilling or unable to defend him. The pain had not yet subsided. It was sharp and burning, but it no longer controlled him. In that moment, he realized he had a choice: either continue to strive for the approval of those who could never give it, or live honoring the love of the only person who had always been on his side, his mother. After breakfast, they went outside. The fresh air and endless fields under the morning sky created a sense of freedom. His grandmother gently took his hand. "Elias, you may not see it now, but your life is not ruined. You are not broken. You are rebuilding. Your scars are part of your story, but not the whole of it. This is your story, and only you decide how to tell it." Her words penetrated deep into his heart, and he understood that she was right. His service, his sacrifices, even the trauma he endured, these were not the end of his journey. They were merely chapters in his life that did not define his worth. His worth was defined by his strength of spirit, his ability to move forward, and to choose love over bitterness. Later that day, he went to the old barn where he had spent his childhood. Dust motes danced in the air, and sunlight streamed through cracks in the walls. He settled on a bale of hay, examining his hands, calloused and scarred. For a long time he had believed these hands had failed his family. Now he realized they had endured more than many others. They had fought, given, and held on when all seemed lost. His mother would be proud of him, not ashamed. This thought once again opened the floodgates of his emotions, but this time the tears were not of shame, but of release. He felt her presence beside him, not as a ghost, but as a reminder that love is immortal. His grandmother's wisdom helped him see that his mother's love still guided him, inspiring him to live not for his father's approval, but for his own peace of mind. That night, falling asleep in the farmhouse, he made a silent promise to himself. He would no longer chase his father's recognition. He would no longer allow the coldness of others to define his essence. Instead, he would build a life his mother would be proud of, a life founded on compassion, integrity, and a strength that manifests not in control, but in love. In the weeks that followed, he helped his grandmother around the farm. The work was not easy, and his injured leg slowed him down, but his grandmother never made him feel like a burden. She treated him as family, as her beloved grandson, not as a soldier broken by war. With each passing day, he grew stronger, not only physically, but also spiritually. He often thought about returning home to confront his father and tell him the whole truth. But then he realized that his father didn't deserve it. His denial, cruelty, and silence were his personal prison, one he didn't need to return to. Instead, he began to make plans for the future. He thought about finding a job that he could manage despite his injury, about creating something of his own, about one day building a family where there would never be room for the coldness he had experienced. He dreamed of teaching his children what his mother had taught him, that despite all hardships, love makes a person whole. Memories returned to that Easter dinner, a pivotal moment that marked the twilight of his former life. This event was characterized by cruelty, humiliation, and pain, but it was also the starting point for realizing the truth. His father's rejection seemed to foretell the collapse of everything, but in reality, it initiated something greater, imparting a lesson that would remain forever. Family is defined not by blood ties, but by love, support in the most difficult times, and a reminder of one's worth when the whole world disbelieves it. His father rejected him, but his grandmother pointed the way to truth, and his mother's memory gave him the strength to move forward. Now, looking back, there is no sense of shame. There is an awareness of himself as a person who survived, endured, and managed to rise above cruelty. His life will be dedicated to honoring the love that saved him. Unfortunately, those who should love most can inflict the deepest pain. But sometimes, if one is lucky, one finds the strength within to transform that pain into something greater, as his mother would have wanted. This is the path he has chosen. That night at his grandmother's farm, he realized the truth. His father's pride and cruelty broke his mother, but her love continued to carry him forward. Years were spent chasing the approval of a man who could never give it, even though the most important thing, love, was already there.